My sister pushed the bread basket toward my son and said, almost casually, "We didn't order for him." Her voice was calm, as if humiliation were simply another side item on the menu. My father chuckled. "You should have packed him something." Their children were slicing into $100 steaks, while mine stared silently at cold bread. I smiled, released one quiet word, "Noted." Every head at the table turned. They thought that was the end of it. They were wrong, because what unfolded after that dinner didn't just change the dynamics of my family, it exposed the truth we'd all been trained to ignore. When people ask what my family is like, I usually say, complicated. It's easier than explaining the hierarchy I grew up under, one where my parents treated my sister, Tesser, like glass and me like concrete. She was the fragile one. I was the reliable one. She required protection. I required endurance. When we were younger, I once overheard my mother say, "Aubrey's strong. She doesn't need much love." I laughed back then, believing strength was a medal of honor. But strength has a cost. When you finally break, nobody believes it. I'm 35 now, a single mother raising a thoughtful 9-year-old named Ethan. I work as an administrative manager at a charter school in Tempe. Nothing glamorous, but honest. Steady work that keeps our world stable. My parents still live in Phoenix, in the same house I grew up in. The wallpaper hasn't changed since the 90s, and neither have they. My father still confuses discipline with affection. My mother still treats silence like a peace offering. Tesser, the lifelong golden child, drifts from job to job and crisis to crisis. Each stumble earns her compassion. My sacrifices earn me responsibility. Charity for her, duty for me. So when they invited me to their 45th anniversary dinner, I chose foolishly to believe it might be a truce. I booked the restaurant, arranged a beautifully restored wedding photo, and convinced myself we could all sit at one table without reopening old wounds. I didn't realize I was walking into a script I'd been performing my entire life. Ethan and I arrived early. He wore a little navy blazer, hair combed just the way he preferred, neat, but not babyish. Inside, the restaurant glowed with low lighting and the fragrance of seared steak. It felt warm and polished, a place where families pretended to love each other over expensive wine. Tesser and her family were already sprawled across the booth. She didn't bother to stand when we approached. My mother offered a distracted hug. My father didn't move at all. The gift bag containing the restored wedding photo sat beside me like an unwanted hitchhiker. Ethan quietly studied the menu. "Anything you want?" I whispered. He smiled at the chicken tenders, simple, comforting, safe. I was about to flag down the waiter when Tessa slid the bread basket toward him. "We didn't order for your son," she said. "Mom thought he's a picky eater anyway." Before I could respond, my father added, "Should have brought him something." It wasn't just what they said, it was the ease, the muscle memory of dismissing me. Ethan's shoulders fell. Not a tear, just resignation. That quiet pain children feel when they realize adults can be cruel. Something inside me cracked, but not loudly, more like a fault line finally shifting. I smiled. "Noted." The word echoed across the table like a glass tapping against stone. The waiter returned to take our orders. The air felt thick, almost metallic. I stood. My chair scraped sharply across the floor, cutting through the murmur of nearby conversations. "Actually," I told the waiter, "cancel anything that hasn't reached the kitchen and put whatever has already been prepared on my father's tab. This is his anniversary, after all." Silence, shock, stunned blinking. "And my son," I added smoothly, "will have the ribeye medium rare with truffle fries and a Coke." The waiter nodded and practically vanished. Ethan looked at me, really looked, hand in his quiet eyes. I saw understanding. His mother wasn't going to fold anymore. Dinner after that felt like sitting inside a pressure cooker. Tesser whispered. Duck scowled. My father chewed angrily. My mother climbed brittle small talk. But they said nothing when the bill arrived. The waiter placed it in front of my father with surgical precision. As we left, I placed the beautifully framed wedding photo on a table. "Happy anniversary," I said, softly but firmly, then walked out with my son. Outside, Ethan squeezed my hand. "You weren't scared?" he said. I smiled. No, baby, I was done. By the time I tucked him into bed, my phone was flashing with missed calls and blame-filled voicemails. I ignored all of them. Then Tessa texted, "You owe Dad for the dinner. $1,200. Pay your share." I typed one word. Noted. I didn't send it. The next morning, my parents and Tessa showed up unannounced. An envelope in my father's hand. They accused me, lectured me, demanded money. But I wasn't the same woman they expected. I wasn't alone either. I'd call Uncle Frank, the only relative who ever treated me like more than a utility. He arrived moments later with Aunt Laura and with him. The entire house shifted. On the counter, he placed photocopies of the payments I'd made for Tessa over the years. Rent, utilities, bills, groceries. I had receipts. Tessa blanched. "You kept records." "I keep receipts," I said, "for people who forget how much they take." My mother insisted it was private family business. "Then start acting like a family," Laura replied. The room went still. I opened the envelope. $1,200 in restaurant charges. At the bottom, in my mother's handwriting, "Pay your share." I placed $600 on top. "Here's half." Not out of guilt, out of pettiness. "I sleep better knowing you didn't get the whole thing." My father sputtered about disrespect. I told him the truth. "I'm not being disrespectful. I'm being done." Then I slid forward the final piece of evidence, the one I found months earlier, buried in a box in the garage. A letter in my mother's handwriting, 35 years old. "I don't think I'll ever bond with this second child. I'm too tired to try." The silence afterward was louder than any shouting match. I opened the door. They left angry, stunned, unraveling. I locked it behind them. 2 hours later, CPS knocked on my door. Anonymous complaint. False report. Transparent as glass. The case workers were kind, professional. They looked around, asked questions, smiled at Ethan's artwork on the fridge. Before leaving, one said quietly, "You'd be surprised how often family does this." I wasn't surprised at all. The next morning, I called my lawyer. We filed cease and desist orders, gathered documentation, handled everything with precision. A week later, my parents tried to file for grandparent visitation. It was dismissed in 3 days. Silence followed. Real silence. Not the kind they WAPONIZED. Doug sent me half the rent I'd covered for them over the years. No apology, just numbers. I blocked him. 1 week later, I saw my mother at the grocery store. She looked smaller somehow, older. She avoided my eyes, pretending to analyze apples. I walked right past her without slowing my step. For once, I didn't shrink myself to make her comfortable. Ethan and I took a trip to Prescott. Just the two of us. We camped by the lake, roasted marshmallows, watched the sky soften into starlight. At the fire's edge, he looked at me and said, "You seem lighter, Mom." I nodded. That's what freedom feels like. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't sad. I wasn't angry. I was free. So if you've ever drawn a line with family to protect your peace, tell me where you're listening from tonight. Because I know the echo not after alone. The silence piece doesn't arrive with fireworks. It slips in quietly. In the weeks after cutting ties with my parents and Tessa, life settled into a rhythm that felt almost foreign, a stillness I wasn't used to. I'd spent my whole life bracing for impact, anticipating the next comment, the next guilt trip, the next emotional landmine. Now, the silence in my home wasn't threatening. It was healing. But calm has a way of revealing the things you never knew you were carrying. 1. The shift at worky. Notice the shift first at work. I'd always been the dependable one, the one who stayed late, answered emails at midnight, fixed everyone else's mistakes. But now, something inside me had changed. I didn't absorb the stress the same way anymore. One afternoon, the principal, Ms. Ramirez, called me into her office. She looked at me carefully. "Aubrey, you seem different." For a moment, panic flickered, dulled instincts rising. Was this trouble, criticism, disappointment? But her voice softened, lighter, more sure of yourself. I exhaled. She continued, "I don't know what happened, but whatever it was, it looks good on you." I smiled, because I knew exactly what had happened. For the first time, I'd chosen myself. 2. The unexpected letter 2 weeks later. A letter arrived in my mailbox. No return address. But I recognized the handwriting immediately. My mother's. My hands trembled not from fear, but something heavier. Something like grief for the version of me that still wished she'd opened this envelope and find love inside. I opened it anyway. Inside was a short letter, clean, controlled, charmless. Aubrey, your reaction at the dinner was extreme. We hope you will reconsider your position and allow us back into Athens' life when you are calmer. Families have disagreements. That doesn't mean you cut them off. Mom, no apology, no accountability, just rewritten history. Old me might have cried. This me didn't even flinch. I folded the letter neatly, walked outside, and dropped it into the recycling bin. Some things are not worth their CHIVING. 3. The call from CPS again a week later. My phone rang, a number I recognized too well. Child Protective Services. My heart sank just for a moment before my mind caught up. I answered. A gentle voice said, Miss Carter, no home visit, just a follow-up. We need to inform you that a second anonymous report came in, but we've already marked it unsubstantiated based on your previous file. My stomach tightened. Whoever filed the report didn't know when to stop. I thanked the worker. She hesitated, off the record. Some families don't understand boundaries until a court draws them. You're doing the right thing. After I hung up, I sat quietly at the kitchen table. Then I called my lawyer. 4. The line they couldn't cross. Karen didn't hesitate. We're escalating, she said. Harassment, malicious reporting, and continued endangerment of your peace. They'll learn the legal definition of done. We filed everything, every message, every report, every attempt to wedge themselves into my life through force instead of love. The state responded quickly. A protective order wasn't granted yet, but a warning notice was issued. Any continued reports or attempts at interference without evidence would be treated as malicious intent, a line drawn by law. Even my parents couldn't pretend not to see it. 5. Tessa's Falland. Her message on the evening. After I picked up Ethan from school, I saw a message request on my phone. From Tessa. I almost ignored it, but something in me, maybe curiosity, maybe closure, opened it. Everything is falling apart. Doug left. Mom is blaming me for the lawyer thing. Dad won't talk to me. I thought you'd be happy, but somehow I think you're not. I don't know what to do. I stare at the message. Old me would have rushed in, offered money, babysat her kids, saved her again. New me understood the truth. I wasn't her safety net. I was her pattern. So I replied with one sentence. I hope you find the help you need. Not cold, not cruel, just done. She didn't respond. 6. The night Ethan finally asked it on night. After dinner, Ethan stood in the doorway of my bedroom. Hesitant. Mom, can I ask something? Anything? I said. He sat beside me on the bed, small fingers picking at the blanket. Was I the reason they were mean to you? My breath caught. I turned to him immediately. I cupped his cheeks gently. No, I said. You were the reason. I finally said. Enough. His eyes shone with understanding, far beyond his age. I'm glad you chose us, he whispered. I smiled and pulled him close. I always will. 7. The new traditions. Passed quietly one Saturday morning. Ethan came to me with a brochure he grabbed from school fly fishing lessons at Lake Pleasant. Want to start a new tradition, he asked. Not a holiday, not a birthday, just a new tradition, the two of us, choosing our own story. I looked at him, this observant, gentle boy who had watched me break generational patterns with nothing but strength and a shaking breath. Yes, I said, let's start something that's ours. His smile stretched wide, and in that moment, I realized blood might define where you come from, but choice defines where you're going. 8. The real ending freedom didn't look like fireworks or big victories. It looked like Ethan laughing by the water, like my phone staying silent, like sleeping deeply for the first time in years. It looked like building a life where love wasn't conditional, a life where my son and I weren't surviving family, we were choosing each other. So if you're listening from a place where you're learning to let go, learning to heal, or learning to build a life you never had. You're not alone. Healing doesn't happen in a straight line. It spirals forward, backward, sideways like a tide that knows the moon, but refuses to be predictable. In the months after I cut ties with my parents and Tesser, life settled into a rhythm I didn't recognize at first, a rhythm without dread. The absence of chaos felt strange, like my home was suddenly too quiet. But slowly, I realized the quiet wasn't empty. It was peaceful. And peace, I learned, has a sound. One. The first holiday without them, first test of my new boundaries came in November. Thanksgiving. For as long as I could remember, my role on that day had been the same: bring the dishes, bring the energy, bring the emotional glue to keep everyone else from falling apart. But this year, my phone stayed silent. No invitations, no guilt trips, just nothing. Ethan looked at me as we cooked breakfast that morning. Are you sad we're not going? I stirred the pancake batter slowly. Old versions of me might have been. But now, no, I said honestly. I'm relieved. He nodded, as if he already understood. After breakfast, I surprised him. Get dressed. We're going on an adventure. We drove to Flagstaff, where the air smelled like pine and winter was already creeping along the tree line. We found a tiny diner with a chalkboard menu and mismatched mugs. The waitress called everyone honey, and the apple pie tasted like childhood should have tasted. We ate in a warm booth while snow flurries drifted outside the window. Mom, Ethan whispered, this feels like a real holiday, not fancy, not formal, not forced. Just us, just joy, just freedom. 2. The unexpected visitor. A few days after Thanksgiving, there was a knock on my door. I froze. Not out of fear, old instincts again, but something deeper, something remembering. When I opened the door, I found my Aunt Laura standing there, clutching a small tin of cookies. Don't worry, she said gently. No ambush, just me. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. She stepped inside, hugged me tightly. I've been wanting to come sooner, but I wanted to give you space. I poured us both tea, and we sat at the kitchen table, the same place where I'd once opened a letter that nearly broke me. She hesitated. You know they're still pretending nothing happened? I nodded. Of course they were. Aunt Tesser, she's unraveling. Your mother is blaming her for everything. Your father refuses to speak your name. I felt nothing. Not sadness, not triumph, just clarity. Laura reached across the table. Aubrey, I want you to hear something. You did the right thing, and I know it came at a cost, but you saved yourself, and you saved Ethan. My throat tightened, but I held myself steady. For the first time in my life, someone in my family wasn't asking me to carry the blame. They were acknowledging the truth. 3. The job offer December arrived quietly. One Tuesday morning, the principal, Ms. Ramirez, knocked on my office door. Aubrey, do you have a moment? She stepped inside, closed the door, and looked genuinely excited. We're opening a new campus next fall, she said, and I want you to lead the operations team. It's a promotion, a raise, better hours, and more autonomy. For a second, I didn't speak. Me? I asked. She smiled. You've held this school together for years. Everyone knows it. And lately, you're different, more confident. You know your boundaries. That's the kind of leadership we need. I accepted the position, not just for the career growth, but because someone finally saw me as capable without expecting me to bleed for it. For the Christmas that didn't hurt Christmas had always been a production in my family, coordinated, polished, and suffocating. This year, Ethan and I did something different. We bought a small secondhand tree from a thrift store, slightly lopsided but charming. We decorated it with mismatched ornaments and paper snowflakes he cut himself. We drank hot chocolate while watching old holiday movies. There were no backhanded comments, no forced traditions, no pretending. Just the sound of Ethan laughing so hard he spilled cocoa on the couch. At one point, he leaned against me and whispered, I like it better this way. Me too, I said. I meant it with every piece of my heart. 5. The letter I finally wrote in January. After a night of restless sleep, I sat at my desk and opened a Word document. Flowed out of me like water breaking through a dam. I wrote about the things they never apologized for, about the favoritism I'd been forced to swallow, about the years I mistook survival for strength. When I finished, my chest felt lighter, not healed completely, but healing. 6. Tessa's confession. Late one night, my phone buzzed, a voicemail from Tessa. I almost deleted it without listening, but something told me to hear it. Her voice was shaky, stripped of her usual arrogance. Aubrey, I don't know if I'm saying this right, but I'm sorry for everything, for the dinner, for letting them treat you the way they did, for not seeing what you carried. I don't expect forgiveness. I needed to say this. I sat still for a long moment after it ended. Not angry, not relieved, just reflective. Her apology didn't change the past, and it didn't obligate me to reopen the door. But it was the first time in my entire life that Tessa had acknowledged the imbalance we were raised in. I didn't respond, but I didn't delete it either. Some words are meant to rest for a while before you decide what to do with them. 7. The night everything finally clicked on quiet evening, months into our new life, Ethan and I sat on the porch watching the sunset. He rested his head on my shoulder. Mom, he murmured, do you think they'll ever change? I considered my answer carefully. Maybe, I said, but change isn't something people do because we want them to. They have to want it for themselves. He nodded slowly, absorbing that truth like a seed sinking into soil. So, do we have to let them back someday? I wrapped my arm around him and pulled him close. No, honey, we don't have to let anyone back who hurts us just because they're family. We let people in when they act like they love us, not just when they share our DNA. He smiled, small and wise. That sounds like a rule we should keep. And under the warm Arizona sky, I felt something settle inside me, something I had been chasing my entire life. Peace. Not borrowed, not conditional. Mine. 8. The new life we built. Spring. Our lives had transformed quietly, but undeniably. I began journaling every night. Ethan joined a small art club and flourished. We replanted the dying garden in our backyard. We hiked. We cooked simple meals. We laughed more. We didn't walk on eggshells anymore. The absence of family didn't feel like loss. It felt like space. And in that space, we built something real. Something stable. Something healthy. Something ours. The real truth of part 3. Freedom didn't just change our lives. It gave us a new one. A life where love is gentle, where boundaries are punishments, where apologies mean something, where peace is not earned, it's chosen. So if you're reading this from a place where you're wondering whether breaking the cycle is worth the fallout, I promise you this: your peace is holy, your boundaries are valid, and your story isn't over. The line that became a door years past, quietly, meaningfully, not dramatic, not explosive, just life cleaner, lighter. And finally mine. When you walk away from a family that shaped you, it doesn't end in fireworks. It ends in layers. It ends in echoes. But eventually, the echoes fade. 1. The call I didn't expect. It happened on a warm April evening. Ethan was 12 now, duller, more confident, with the same observant eyes he had at 9, but with a steadiness he learned from watching me rebuild. The phone rang. Unknown number. Something in me recognized the silence on the other end before the voice finally spoke. Aubrey, it's your mother. I didn't speak. I didn't fill the pause. I didn't rescue her from her own discomfort. She exhaled a shaking breath. Your father. He passed away this morning. I closed my eyes, not from grief, but from the weight of a life that had always been complicated. I thought you should know, she added. Not I miss you. Not I'm sorry. Just information. Like a weather report delivered by a stranger, I answered calmly. Thank you for calling. She hesitated. Do you want to come to this service? For the first time in my life, I considered my answer not as a daughter, but as a woman who had finally learned her own worth. No, I said gently. I wish you peace, but I need to protect mine. Her breath stuttered like she'd expected me to fold, the way I always had. But I didn't. I ended the call, and something inside me ended too quietly, mercifully. 2. The letter I received months later, 3 months after the funeral. A small envelope arrived. No return address. Inside was a letter. My mother's handwriting was older, shakier, less guarded. Aubrey, I don't know how to begin except to say, the age makes you see things you once refused to acknowledge. You were not loved the way you deserved. I thought being hard on you would make you strong. I see now it only made you silent. I can't undo who I was, but I hope someday you'll understand that I was broken long before you were born. If you never respond, I'll understand. Momi read it twice. The apology wasn't perfect. It wasn't complete. It didn't erase the past. But it was real. I didn't write back. I didn't reopen the door, but I placed the letter gently into a drawer, not out of longing, but out of closure. Some stories don't end with reconciliation. Some end with recognition. And that was enough. 3. The day Ethan asked the hardest question on evening. As the sun was lowering itself behind the mountains, Ethan sat beside me on the porch, legs stretched out, shoes muddy from climbing in the yard. Mom, do you ever regret it? Cutting them off. I didn't answer immediately. Regret is a complicated creature, half memory, half myth. Finally, I said, no, I regret the years I spent believing I deserve less. But walking away, that was the first thing I ever did entirely for us. He nodded slowly. I'm glad you chose peace. I smiled at him. I chose you. He leaned against me, taller now, but still my boy. Point 4. The new family you chose years go on, and the cast of our lives shifts. And Laura remained a steady presence. Holidays, birthdays, random Tuesdays where she dropped off soup or sat on the couch and talked about everything and nothing. Uncle Frank taught Ethan how to fix things: bikes, leaky faucets, the courage to stand up for himself. They didn't replace what I lost. They simply filled the spaces where love should have always lived. Family, I learned, isn't who shares your blood. It's who shares your burden, your joy, your growth. Your peace. 5. The final senior's Lateran Ethan's 18th birthday. We returned to the lake in Prescott, the same place we had camped after everything fell apart. Only this time, he wasn't a shy boy. He was a young man, confident, artistic, grounded. We sat at the edge of the water, the same reflection of stars dancing across the surface. Mom, he said softly, everything you did back then, it didn't just change your life, it changed mine. I looked at him, truly looked, and saw the legacy I was leaving, not the legacy I inherited. You taught me what love is supposed to feel like, he continued, and what it isn't. My throat tightened, and one day, he added with a shy smile, when I have kids, I'm going to give them the childhood you gave me after you chose yourself. Tears blurred my vision, not from sadness, but from the fullness of a life I once thought was impossible. I reached over and took his hand. I broke the cycle for you, I whispered. He squeezed my fingers gently, and I'll keep it broken. The true ending. This story didn't end with revenge. It didn't end with an apology that fixed everything. It didn't end with reunion or collapse or dramatic confrontation. It ended with something much quieter, much stronger. A woman choosing herself, a child growing in peace, a cycle stopping with one brave decision, a future built intentionally, not inherited. Some families break you, some families heal you, and sometimes the family you build from scratch becomes the truest one of all. This is the end of the story. Not because everything is perfect, but because everything is finally yours.